by Anglican fans at
A happy little cloud.
From birth, we are all taught what our parents have been taught, which is often simply what their parents have taught them. We take this in without ever asking many questions, such as who we are, why we are here, and why things are the way they are. Generations have passed, trends have changed, technologies have emerged, and communication has opened the doors for new evolutionary ideas and insights that are pushing the envelope on society's boundaries. Yet evolutionary ideas seem to remain in the fantasy section of an industrialist system. For in the good old ways of a governing establishment, we ought to trust. Authority knows best is the slogan that guides our conventional wisdom. We, meanwhile, are left to mind our own business, go on with our lives, and attempt to live happily ever after, as long as we conform to the norms forced upon us. From cradle to grave, we are led to follow the guidelines of what authority defines as a state-of-the-art system, one in which success seems to begin and end within the running wheel of education, career performance, debt management, and retirement. A vibrant economy is the ultimate priority of our global hierarchy, while a vibrant planet, the respect of all life forms, healthy foods, peaceful ways, and conscious actions seem to be a mere subject of conversation, often turned into a few fundraising campaigns with very little or no impact at all. We shall nonetheless pass on these capitalist and patriotic values to our children, giving them the tools to carry out the very same cycle we have been in for as long as we can remember, because after all, it is all we have ever known. Some have stated that we have reached the peak of human evolution, but have we really moved beyond all archaic and backward concepts of reality? Have we collectively let go of all that currently restrains humanity? When we consciously expand our awareness and look beyond what our system stands for, we realize that it is simply erroneous to presume that it endorses a forever sustainable way of living. It has no concern for respecting either nature or human lives. It only profits through the promotion of unconsciousness. How many war casualties, oil spills, dead fish, and natural disasters will we need to see before we set aside our differences and awaken to our interconnectedness with each other, the earth, and all life forms? We destroy our home, the earth, for the sake of the economy. We torture and treat animals as mere commodities for the sake of the economy. We keep on using oil, despite the alternatives, for the sake of the economy. We perpetuate wars and kill each other for the sake of the economy. We promote superficial and materialistic values for the sake of the economy. We indebt the poor for the sake of the economy. We remain asleep for the sake of the economy. The understanding and wisdom that would deprogram our minds and open our eyes to the grand scheme of things has no economic value.
So we produced the collective evolution one. Now we want to take it to the next level. What do you guys think would be the next step?
We need to give people a bigger foundation as to what's playing out and sort of help them understand the bigger picture of everything. The biggest thing to realize is that none of what we experience is realistically set in stone. It can all be moved around.
I think it's key in this one if we can kind of bring more examples to it and through situations that can relate to the material that we're presenting.
Yeah, well, everyone's looking for truth right now. I feel that providing clarity in what we've experienced within our lives and what we understand, it can assist other people in experiencing their own clarity and finding their own peace.
I mean, one of the other big things is bringing in the full understanding of the ego.
Okay, so you said the body, you want to talk about the planet, and you also want to get to the ego.
Right.
How are we going to bring this all together?
Obviously about the shift and how we're shifting our consciousness towards how we're observing and the awareness behind everything that we're experiencing.
Okay, so explain who you are and where you get your information from.
Well, I'm a soul that came back to assist humanity. And the reason I'm here is to assist specifically with the shift that we're going in. Now, as for myself, my physicality and so forth is no different than any other human on the planet. However, what makes the difference and where this information is coming from is my soul. Now, my soul is the unified soul, which is basically both halves put together, which are basically the twin souls united. But it's also a soul that went through a whole evolutionary cycle and basically completed its enlightenment. Now, once it has completed its enlightenment, it basically made an agreement that it was going to come back around this time to assist with the shift, knowing that the shift was going to take form. And because it was going to take form, we realized that there was going to need some assistance in bringing higher vibration and a different level of clarity. So whenever I'm presenting, whatever I'm sharing, it's not coming from, studying other books or referring to other philosophies or anything of that nature. It's basically information coming from source. It's basically coming from a realization that this human experience is just that, a human experience.
Imagine for an instant that life does not exist. Erase the entire universe, the galaxies, the planets, and all life forms. Imagine there is just nothingness. Nothing to look at. Nothing to taste. Nothing to hear. Nothing at all for our senses to perceive. This is infinite consciousness in its rawest form. Doesn't seem very exciting, does it? This is why we have decided to create. Why have we created all that we experience on the planet? What is the purpose of life? Is this all simply a series of random events? Or is there an ultimate reason as to why we are all here? We are all one consciousness, all equal parts of one unified source. It is of this source that all matter, life, and experience is made. Source, or consciousness, is what some may refer to as God or the Creator. Many physicists refer to it as the unified field of consciousness. Many believe it to be a separate entity altogether. However, this consciousness is not something outside of or greater than us. It simply is us. The truth is, you already know this. Beyond all ideals, perceptions, accepted concepts of our reality and belief systems that we have, there is a fundamental knowing that each one of us holds. That knowing is an understanding of who and what we truly are. The only reason we don't clearly see it, and often doubt it, is because we have chosen to forget. By forgetting, we are able to engage in the experience fully and see what each has to offer. Let's back up for a moment. We are source, one consciousness. But what does that actually mean? Who are we? Why are we experiencing what we call life on this planet? To answer this, remember what it felt like to be infinite consciousness? Not that experientially rich, is it? This is why Source, who we truly are, decided to expand itself into individual bits of consciousness. These individual bits of consciousness are all souls. These souls are who we truly are. We are individual facets of a whole, all connected as one, all made from the same thing and all complete potentiality. You may wonder why Source, who is already whole and all-knowing, needed to expand itself into souls if it already knows and is everything. It did so because Source wanted to become experientially rich. By expanding into souls, Source can use its creativity to know itself in an even richer way. Now that we understand who we are, the next big question is, why are we here experiencing life on this planet? The search for this answer is naturally apparent within each of us. It is the big question we have been trying to answer for centuries on this planet. Not that it was ever not known, but it was simply hidden and misguided. The purpose to life is not to plague ourselves with finding the answer, but instead to be on a journey of experiencing, learning, and remembering who we truly are.
There's three things that we're actually doing. We're here to experience what we can call play. The second part of it is that we're actually learning through our play. And third is to become enlightened. And this is what we created.
This simply means that each soul is gaining more and more experiences, and over time and many lives, it remembers more and more who it truly is. In addition to learning and experiencing what we need to as individual souls, each soul designs each of its lives prior to experiencing each one. Everything from our body, to where we will be born on the planet, to who our parents will be, to what type of life we will have. These are all chosen by us.
For example, let's take a look at the different countries. Do they not all offer the people that live in them a completely different experience than another one would? Yes. Or how about parents? Do they not all offer their children a completely different experience than another? Of course they do. It's this exact logic that shows why we would create so many unique facets to this experience. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you live in Bolivia or the US, whether you have a really passive or an assertive parent, whether you have a disability or not. Each of these are all just different experiences that we decided to offer and create.
When we look at some of the more intense experiences on the planet, we can ask, why would we choose to experience these things? What were we thinking? To answer simply, we weren't thinking. The mind is what thinks and judges. The soul is neutral. It sees the experience for what it is, just an experience. Remember, the soul is here to become experientially rich, not to define and judge any experience as good or bad.
We can look at some experiences and say, wow, that's really intense. There's no way I would choose to do that. But when you really look at it, where is that thought coming from? Because the soul is neutral with what it sees and experiences. It's the mind, because of the way it's been programmed and conditioned to perceive things, that it judges things, it defines things, it categorizes things. But, in actuality, there's no real truth to this. Because if you were to take away the story of it being good or bad or right or wrong, you're left with the one universal truth, that everything is just an experience. We have to realize that we are not the mind that is defining these things by judging and categorizing and whatnot. We have to realize and remember that we are neutral souls that are creating experiences for ourselves for our own growth.
Now, does this mean that the soul is cold or unloving? Absolutely not. It is only the mind that will push you to define it in this way. The soul, on the other hand, sees each challenge as another opportunity to let go of or further discover who it truly is. We have chosen to create our experiences each and every time we incarnate. To assist in this process, our souls act as a recorder while we experience. Each experience that provides growth is observed and retained by the soul so it can continue its evolution. The recording allows us to create whatever experience we require next based on what we have experienced already. Remember, the soul has come into the body forgetting who it truly is. Why? To enable itself to have these experiences and to be able to do so fully and completely.
And then what we've created is basically ourselves fragmented and become soul fragments, and to come here to create a physicality and to experience ourselves in a physicality, forgetting who we are completely. And in that play of forgetting who we are, then we can actually look at our creation, and when we're playing with it, to us it's almost like we don't know anything about it. Everything is an experience of new. It's like, I use the example sometimes where, here you are, and you're the greatest engineer, and you have this capability to create amazingly in your mind, and you have these abilities. So here we are, this engineer decides it's going to create an amusement park. So it creates this beautiful amusement park, but then it wants to experience what it's like to play in an amusement park. But what better way to experience an amusement park than to forget that you're actually the one that created that amusement park? Because if you're going there knowing that you created it, then you know exactly how it all functions. Not only that, if I had to take the analogy of just the engineer is going to show up at this amusement park, and it's going to look around and say, oh yeah, I created that, I know that. And even if it goes on the ride, it knows where the next curve is and how it's going to dip, and it really understands that. But at the same time, it's also observing how I can adjust it and tweak it and make it different. So the experience is totally different compared to bringing a child to this amusement park. Because the child doesn't know anything about it. It's never experienced it. Everything is new. So this child shows up and it's like, wow, there's all this stuff to play with. And it's not even aware. So if it gets on the ride, it has no idea what the ride's going to provide. It doesn't know what curve is going to be next and how it's going to feel. And each time it's going to feel a little bit different. And that whatever it's playing with, it is always expanded because of the fact that it really is. It's like anyone doing something for the first time. And it's just amazing because you've never experienced it before. So everything is much more intense, much more colorful, much more exuberant in a way of experiencing it. So it's completely in that fashion. So here we are, we've created these playgrounds, and this earth being one of them, and we've come here to experience it.
We must also understand that what we experience today has not always been the same. When we initially created the body and planet, the experience was much more harmonious, as we did not have duality and separation like we do today. As you can imagine, the planet and conditions were quite different from today. As time went on and consciousness evolved, we shifted the planet and body to reflect something new. This allows us to experience something different. Today, we are experiencing a reality we chose and agreed to experience, which is full of duality, separation, intensity, and disconnection. Remember, the soul is simply pure consciousness, pure love, and potentiality. It does not judge what we experience. It simply wants to experience everything, as everything has growth in it. Along with expanding into souls and designing experiences for these souls to live out, we as Source also created many playgrounds, or what we call planets, to have these experiences and lives on. Earth, the planet we have our experiences on. Sure, this isn't the only planet where souls are having experiences, but this is where the souls this documentary is intended for are having their experience. Earth is a beautiful and expansive planet that serves as a playground for us to experience our lives upon. Source, who we are, created this playground to fit a certain experience we were choosing to have. What exactly does this mean? It means we created each individual aspect of the planet to be the way it is, because just like we design our experiences, we also design the planet to give us a specific experience. This may bring up the question, what about nature? Nature is not a constant. It is not something that is simply there. We have designed nature to reflect our consciousness, meaning whatever we are choosing to experience collectively will be made available through the planet by reflecting the various conditions to match what we choose to experience. To put it more clearly, the planet is changing as we change, something the scientific community refers to as evolution.
So we can look at it and say, well, the analytical side say, well, the planet is evolving as we are evolving, and it's true. In a way, it is evolving. But is it, we look at it as a point of evolution? No, it's actually molding itself to our consciousness, how we're experiencing it.
Let's look at the planet today. Currently, we are treating our planet in a very destructive manner. We abuse and destroy it through the various toxins and resources we have come to rely upon. Of course, this reliance is not out of necessity. It instead exists simply for economic profit. But let's remember that we have chosen to forget who we truly are, which means we are very disconnected from who we truly are. In turn, we are also very disconnected from the planet. It should therefore come as no surprise that the destruction of our planet is what is playing out as a result. The planet is merely playing out our current level of consciousness.
So when you take a look at how the planet responds to each of our actions, it doesn't respond as a separate entity. It responds as a direct reflection of us, because it is a part of who we are consciously. Therefore, when we play out disconnection or survival, the planet will reflect that with us.
When we look at the animal kingdom, we can see a similar trend. This is because the animals are not on an individual evolutionary process. They too simply reflect our consciousness. This is exemplified now by the animal kingdom being in a very separated state. They even go as far as to consume one another. While it may appear to be the food chain, it's merely reflecting the separation we're playing out in our current level of consciousness. This is today. While in the past we were projecting a different experience, the animals did not consume each other. It's simply because our consciousness was reflecting a different experience.
We look at it, and I know this is going to be challenging analytical minds, but really to understand that the animal kingdom was really never set up the way it was, where it was a food chain. They didn't eat each other. With the original software, it was all harmonious. But, when the programs got changed and we decided to have that intense, the food chain started to create. The same thing with ourselves. We started to consume food where we didn't need to consume food in the way that we are doing now.
When we look at this, we can quickly realize that if the planet and the animals are a reflection of our conscious state, then there is nothing concrete about how it must be. There is no form the planet must take, and ultimately, we are in control of choosing what we wish to create.
When you look at everything that's recently taken place on the planet, you realize there's a lot of instability. Things are very unpredictable. And you might wonder, why is that? Why does it seem like everything's playing out in this manner? Well, the planet is simply reflecting us. See, as souls, we've chosen to wake up and shift the experience that we're having here. So in response, the planet is creating conditions that will push us to actually shift our experience here.
What we choose to create on the planet is a collective decision, as no one in particular owns anything on the planet. Sure, we may be currently playing under the illusion of ownership, where we think we own land, cars, possessions, and even people. But this is nothing more than a man-made concept. The planet and everything with it is to be shared. Imagine children showed up to a playground and some of them decided to take ownership of certain items in it. They set up barriers and gates around each item to stop others from being able to play. After doing this, they begin to tell the others that they cannot play on those items unless they paid to use it. This is precisely what we have done, but on a bigger scale. We have claimed things that aren't truly ours, and then those who did not have equal opportunity to have it in the first place have to pay simply because others were there first.
The planet is the playground for every soul that's here while they're here. When they're not here, they have no partake in it. There's no conquer, divide, or anything of that nature. Nobody owns anything. Everything is shared. Everything is shared. That's how it really is, and that's what we're going back into. But look at it this way. The moment we start to divide, this is mine, and anybody that comes here has to pay me rent or has to pay me for everything that's in there. But do you ever look at it? I mean, if we have to look at it the analytical way and say, ask the question to yourself, all right? Here's the question I ask. You own a piece of paper that says you own this plot of land. Who owned it before that and before that, originally?
The planet we have chosen to create is just that, a planet we have chosen to create. And we have created it to reflect our level of consciousness. We have the power to change it and shift it into any form we choose. It is no single person's responsibility. It's up to us collectively as to how we choose to create it moving forward.
So basically, we created the planet to give us a certain experience. But now that the consciousness shifts, we don't have to play with the same rules and regulations we've set in place in the past.
So we are basically in charge as we shift in consciousness. Our planet, the animal kingdom, nature, the universe, everything shifts accordingly. Because we made everything. Everything is the stage.
We have expanded into souls and have created a planet. Now we need to experience that planet. To achieve this, we created a vehicle for the soul to inhabit while living on the planet.
We are souls, and we're here to have experiences. But how can we have an experience if we don't have a body? We're using it. The soul uses it to learn, to experience itself, and also to become enlightened through it.
We are the conscious force that is driving the body. We do not become the body when we step into it. We are just using it to experience the planet. Similar to the way we get into a car to go from one place to another, we do not become the car. We simply use it. We use the body the same way, to have our consciousness sensorially experience one thing after another. Similar to the way we created the planet, we created the body to have a certain experience and react a certain way within that experience. This, of course, also reflects the level of consciousness we create from. When we look at the body today, we see that it requires quite a high level of maintenance.
When you take a look at the body, you can quickly realize how many limitations we've programmed into it. I mean, think about it. If we don't eat, we can die. If we don't sleep, we can get tired and can barely function or operate. We can even manage to get ourselves sick. I mean, all of this just goes to show us how experientially rich we really made this experience.
Let's take a step back for a moment and look at the original state of the body, the way we initially programmed it to be prior to accepting the change to a more challenging experience.
So basically, we've gone through a lot of changes, and the body is not limited to what we're experiencing. Because just to take the point of even sleeping, eating, and some other the functionalities that we've taken into our life, we originally weren't designed, and we didn't design ourselves as the creator, because we created our own experience here and our own playground. But when we did create ourselves, we didn't have the need to eat, and we didn't need to have the need to sleep. And it was really a cycle that we decided to play with. But at some point, some 10,000 or so years ago, we decided to change and alter some of our programs. So we started to instill this thing, the need to eat. Because originally, before, we never designed ourselves that we needed to consume food to survive or to actually be healthy. All the food was designed for, and because we at that time weren't really engaged with all the different layers that we are creating now, we were just basically fruitarians, meaning that we would consume only fruit. But it was not a necessity for survival or a necessity to feel healthy or anything of that nature. It was more of an opportunity as an experiential realm more than anything else. It wasn't that, if I didn't eat today, that something would happen, my body would complain and so forth. No, it's, do I want to have a sensorial experience of enjoying a fruit and allow it to go through the system, and you would feel the energy of that fruit, how it would create itself through the physicality. And the option of sleeping, the sleeping was not required in that point in time because it decided what we wanted to do. Now, because we were going through cycles and the planet was going through cycles, then we would choose. But, we could sleep 1 hour, we could sleep 10 hours, we could sleep no hours. We wouldn't feel the effects we have now. So we've adapted, we created the program alteration to bring in all of a sudden the need to sleep, the need to eat, to create a different level of experience, a more of a survival mode. Now, we've allowed that as our challenge.
The more we look at it, the more we realize that we simply create conditions for the body based on what we choose to experience. Nothing that we accept today as fact about the body has to be the way it is. It is projected as it needs to be and is able to mold to our consciousness as we change it. We may have analytical data that shows the body must be a certain way, but the science that shows this is simply based on the consciousness creating the current state of the body. In other words, the science is limited to one point in time. As things shift, instead of rewriting science, we have simply held on to the archaic understandings. Let's take, for example, someone who practices sun gazing. Sun gazing is the process of using the energy from the sun to feed the body. This form of body nourishment is currently practiced by many people on the planet. The way it works is simple. When you look at what everything we eat fundamentally is, it is all nutrient energy from the sun. We consume the food and get the energy. By sun gazing, you are simply going directly to the source of the energy and taking it into the body. If practiced enough, one is able to stop eating food completely and simply feed in this manner. To the mind, this may sound far-fetched, but this in fact can be achieved. All that is happening is the consciousness driving the body is choosing to step out of the programmed belief that we must be nourished by food. The body then adapts to the new consciousness and becomes fully capable of feeding directly from the source.
What sun gazing shows us is that even within the programmed requirement of an external source of energy, the body is quite capable of altering the way that it feeds. The body does this by adapting the way it operates based on the consciousness that's driving it.
So with sun gazing, the best time of the day to start is the first 45 minutes of the sunrise and the last 45 minutes of the sunset. Now, this is the best time to do it because at this time, there's actually no UV rays being emitted by the sun. To start, you want to start the first time with 10 seconds. And each day as you progress, you want to do it every day. You'll add on another 10 seconds. So the first day will be 10 seconds, then 20 seconds the next day, and then 30, and then so on. Until you reach a point where you're sun gazing for about 44 minutes. Now, 44 minutes will be the cutoff point because at this point, you're going to see radical changes within the body. You're going to feel a lot lighter, you're going to feel a lot more energy, you'll be eating less, and just your vibration, your energy will overall be a lot higher, and your immunity, your immune system will be top notch. You literally won't get sick at all. I know sun gazing sounds pretty crazy, but there is an Indian man who goes by the name of HRM. Now, he's a world-renowned sun gazer, and I believe since 1995, he hasn't consumed any food other than just boiled water. There's a group of 21 scientists that actually wanted to study him. They wanted to study his daily life. They set out a course of 411 days where they did actually study him daily. He just basically lived his regular life. And they studied his vital signs, how his organs were functioning. At the end of the 411 days, they concluded that all his vital signs were perfectly normal. His body function and mind-body health was absolutely perfectly normal. Now, you can just imagine coming from a scientific mind and what science has told us about how the body works and what it requires. It literally shattered everything they thought they knew about the body. This completely opens the door up for us to understand that the body can utilize other energy sources and that there's actually no limits. I mean, the potential is endless for how we can utilize energy within the physicality.
If we take things even a step further, we can look at the food we consume. What is it made of? The food on the planet is simply a creation, a projection we as Source have created. The food is essentially made of the exact same energy or consciousness that we are. If we are consuming food, which is already what we are, why can't we just use the energy from our bodies already? No external source required.
So when you think about it, what makes us have to eat food if it's all the same energy that we're all made up of? It's because we've programmed ourselves to consume external sources of energy, but we can program ourselves just as easily to not have to.
Once we realize that we are not our bodies, we begin to understand that we are instead a driving force having an experience on the planet. When the body dies, as we call it, we do not die with it. We simply step out and create a new experience in a new body, one that will offer us an entirely new experience.
We come here, it's our vehicle to give us the experience we're choosing to have. Once we're done with it, we step out. There is no tragedy, there is no death. It looks that way at the mind level because we are not in the vehicle any longer. Because what really happens when we step out? It's just the soul decided, I'm done with the trip. So I step out of the trip. I'm done. And we choose another trip. That's all it's about. It's stepping in and stepping out. There is no judgment about it.
When we look at the world today, we can see the disconnection and separation that exists between one another. The divide of countries, the fight for survival, the push to attain greed, power, and control. This is what our world appears to be built off of. What is it that is keeping us so disconnected? Why do we think we are only our bodies and our thoughts? Why are we driven blindly by our emotions? What is driving us on a day-to-day basis? When we think of the word ego, we often associate it with someone that is self-centered and arrogant. Here we are going to refer to the ego as something else. Here, the ego is the program that we operate off of, the piece that drives us on a daily basis and disconnects us from who we truly are.
To add to our experience, what we've allowed to play with also is created what we can call an ego. And the ego is actually a level of mind which basically hosts a series of programs. And it's a very ingenious little program because not only the program, it's actually self-learning. And what it does is basically uses whatever experiences around it and whatever it plays with as your level of experience, what it watches, what it learns from education, it learns from observing others, or what it brings in as our whatever we're watching on television and so forth, or how we relate with. So it takes all this information in and it stores it and it uses it as a form of creating a reality.
Essentially, the ego is the part of us that convinces us that we're nothing more than the bodies that we're in, and that we are the thoughts that we are having. Now, because the fact that this convincing is so well done and that we buy into these thoughts, it becomes so ingrained that it makes it much more difficult to become aware of and actually be able to take control of.
We have all heard it at some point or another, that voice in our head that wants us to act or be a certain way. That voice that makes it seem like we are listening to our own thoughts. Well, think for a moment, if you are listening to your own thoughts, who is really listening? Who are you? In doing this, you realize that you are not the thoughts. You are something else. You are the soul observing the thoughts. The problem is, we never asked this question. Therefore, we go on thinking that we simply are those thoughts we are listening to. There are two parts to the ego, the upper ego and the lower ego. The upper ego is where we define basic characteristics of ourselves. This is done through programming. We define the gender of our body, the type of culture we have, and what programming we take on from our family genetic coding. The second layer of the ego is the lower ego. This is where we store all of the stories, programs, and belief systems that we pick up. These are what drive our decisions and actions throughout our life. Both parts to the ego are nothing more than a false sense of self that is implanted within the subconscious mind. They combine to make us identify and believe that we are our thoughts. It does so by convincing us that our thoughts contain truth within our reality. You are never going to be good enough. You are not worth it. You are not good looking enough. You do not have enough money. These are some of the ego's thoughts. It's the voice that makes us feel self-conscious, that makes us feel like we need to wear our hair a certain way or wear certain clothes to look good. It's the voice that makes us doubt ourselves. It's the story of fear that comes in when we want to speak up and say something. Because we believe in our thoughts, we identify with our thoughts, and then we become our thoughts. And how did the ego come up with these thoughts? Through each of the experiences we have had in our lives.
One of the more powerful facets to the ego is that it is self-learning. Take for example, when we are little, we may be told or hear on television that unless we look a certain way, we are not good looking. The ego would then take this information in and generate it as a thought. We then begin to play out and believe this thought, and before we know it, we have created an entire reality where we fully believe that we are ugly.
Think back to a moment when someone may have called you a name or said something you took offense to. Maybe you responded to it with anger or fought back. Why did you respond in this way? Was it even you responding?
Certain situations may happen where somebody says something or something plays out, And because the ego mind actually stores all these memories of everything that you've experienced in the past, it has a whole collection. So if somebody says to you or says to someone that you're an idiot, right off the bat, the program says, what do you mean I'm an idiot? You know, and it has a response mechanism. But what it actually does even further is that it looks back, and now it takes all the times that it's heard a variation where you felt that you weren't that smart, or that somebody has condemned you, or has said something about you, and so forth. It goes right back to the collection. So now your response that can come out, instead of coming in at a level where it's just responding with that immediate, even though the program is in the background, it also takes everything that is collected. So all of a sudden somebody says you're an idiot, and they actually explode. And you say, well, that's the program. Yes, it is. But it's also using all the ammunition, all the emotional charge that it has accumulated from all those experiences.
Now, of course, the ego is not limited to just thoughts based on looks or self-image. The ego will generate thoughts and create belief systems based on anything and everything we are confronted with in our everyday lives. We will often carry many of these stories our entire life, creating an entire reality around them being true, never realizing that these thoughts and stories are just programs and ideas collected over time. The more you become aware of this, the more you are able to look at the world and identify the ego almost everywhere. It is purposely designed and implanted into everything. But why? What is the reason behind this? To fully understand this, we need to take a step back. Some time ago, we as souls agreed to a challenge. This challenge would involve taking on a software program that would completely disconnect us from who we truly are. It would also involve the intervention of certain souls that would play a role designed to disconnect our world even further. Many can already see this intervention in the systems and infrastructures we currently have in place, most of which have been orchestrated by a select few souls that use these structures to control everything that goes on. This control mechanism includes our economy, education system, religious institutions, food providers, our medical industry, and of course, most importantly, the ego. All of it has been purposely designed and implemented by this controlling group to offer the challenge it creates.
Let's say you were the designer of a program, and you wanted to create a construct where that program would remain trapped all the time. Since you were the designer of it, you would know exactly how that program would respond to everything that you set for it. So it would be very easy to design the construct to keep this program trapped because you always know how it's going to respond. And the only real way this program would ever be able to get out of the traps that you'd set for it within the construct is if it became aware of itself.
The control mechanism is simply a series of constructs designed with the ego in mind. It is built to consistently keep the ego creating ideas and stories that further build its identity. Look at how we fear not having enough money to survive. Look at how we will slave for hours just to get the toys our ego desires. Look at how we fear not having an education or job that will lead us to the ideal life. Look at how we judge one another based on what we do and do not have. Why do we get angry when someone cuts us off while driving? We are trapped in a multi-layered program of thoughts. We are in a prison we do not even realize exists, a prison so well designed that we have become the prison and are willing to fight to protect it. What we must also realize is that the control mechanism, or in other words, the souls that are playing the role of controllers, only have access to our ego mind, which means they are only able to keep us locked within our ego by stimulating it. This is why so much of what we see on a daily basis strokes our ego in some way, shape, or form. The more active it is, the more you identify with it. The more you identify with it, the harder it becomes to ever realize what is actually going on. If you look at many of the movies, television shows, popular songs, and distractions that have been released, they all have one thing in common. They are all designed to shape the mind for a certain life, a way of being. They even go as far as telling the ego how to generate emotions, and by emotions we do not mean feelings, which we often relate them to. The truth is, emotions and feelings are an entirely different thing.
A lot of times what we experience as an emotion, we relate as a feeling, because that we end up using that as a reference point. So the thing is, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling whatever you're feeling. Again, what is that type of feeling? Is that a feeling because it's coming from within you? Or is it a feeling based on a program that's firing up, which is activating an emotion? Because, you know, when you look at an emotion is a physical experience of a program playing out. Okay? So that's all that is. So in this case, when somebody's feeling sad or feeling angry or feeling of any of that nature, I gotta honor my feelings, you know. It is basically what you're doing is you're tuning into what our emotions are. It is not true feeling, because true feeling basically is very, very peaceful, very clear inside, and it is our guiding system.
The emotional responses we often have to certain events are usually the result of how society, or the control structure, has programmed us to respond. Much like in the designer example heard earlier, many things are done to lock us into emotional states. The ego believes that in certain experiences it must respond a certain way. Since we think the ego's thoughts are our own, we oblige and carry out that which is suggested.
When you experience emotions such as happiness, sadness, anger, etc., and you observe where they're coming from, you begin to see that we often operate in a manner very similar to how a robot would. Now, the only difference between us and a robot is that a robot doesn't have an awareness beyond its programming, but we do. We're just unconscious of it. We've forgotten. Now, we've convinced ourselves that we are these programs, these auto-responsive emotions, and that we have no power over them. And this is why we find ourselves constantly responding in the same manner over and over, repeating the same cycle.
How can we experience freedom when we are convinced that what we are doing and experiencing is our own creation? We think we are our clothing opinions. We think we are the type of car we like. We think we are the political side we support or the religion we belong to. We think we are the one that's angry at the person who cuts us off while driving. The truth is, we are none of these thoughts. The deception that makes us feel that we are our thoughts is so grand, so layered, and so deep that we can go our whole lives without ever realizing who we truly are. Freedom can only come by bypassing this program. When we look at where our conscious choices and creations have led us to this point, it's clear to see that we have created an intense sensorial environment. We have created a world where we see each other as complete and separate entities from one another, a separation so severe that we are capable of killing one another. We've created a financial system where we have enslaved ourselves into working the vast majority of our lives, doing things we do not enjoy, just to earn pieces of paper. We take children of complete potentiality and we indoctrinate them, limit them, and force them into a tiny box just so that we can continue to repeat the system. We have become so disconnected from ourselves that we actually harm ourselves simply to appease ego desires. We eat food that is terrible and harmful for our bodies because of the emotional connections we attach to them. We drive cars that run on oil, which pollutes the planet, because it's more important to be profitable than to use the free energy methods that could be easily available to everyone. We put medications into our bodies because we always want that quick fix and are disconnected from treating our bodies in any way that resembles something natural. We drink alcohol and take other mind-altering substances because we feel the need to alter our mind to escape who we think we are on a daily basis. Looking at all of this, can we truly say that our world is in a state of peace? Something needs to change. We cannot keep repeating this cycle over and over again. Doing so would accomplish nothing but the destruction of ourselves and the planet we live on. Every day you see more and more people awakening to the various deceptions taking place on the planet. Many are beginning to see through the created infrastructures, the false events. Through the way the media lies for the benefit of a few, this is becoming increasingly known, and those who understand it want change. The question is, how? One option is to go out and protest, fight, scream, and yell about all of this, but what does that really do? All it does is repeat the same cycle of separation over and over again. We can try to lobby or implement new policy, but what does that do? In a government that's run by people that enforce laws regardless of vote? Absolutely nothing. No president, prime minister, or elected official can do anything to truly change our current state. We can try and overthrow government and restore human rights and freedoms, but what will that do? Nothing. Because the world is not like this because of our lack of rights and freedoms. The world is like this because of us, or more specifically, the way we are programmed. We can change any external part of this world until we are blue in the face, and it will never shift this planet to a peaceful and harmonious state, nor will we experience freedom. Why? Because our consciousness creates the reality before us. If our consciousness stays the same, we will create the same limitations, but in a different form. We will never truly be free until we have freed ourselves from the mind. The very people who are waking up and resisting the system are the same people that agreed to play within this limited structure in the first place. We all created it, together. Control mechanism and all, we agreed to experience this type of world. It has been just an experience.
It's like if you're at a video game store and you're choosing which game you'd like to play. We chose the one with all the intense control mechanism, the structures put in place, to the point where we totally forgot who we truly are. But in order to beat the game, it's simply to get our character to remember who it is.
Taking a look at this on a deeper level, what is the current state of humanity's consciousness? Our reality is currently being driven by a program called the ego, a program that keeps us separated, in a consistent chase for materials, and identified with things that are not a part of who we truly are. What has this consciousness created for our world? We have war, we have greed, we have power, and we have pieces of paper that we slave to make and die to protect because it determines our very survival. We care more about cars, our clothes, our looks, and convenience than we do about caring for the planet we live on or our own bodies. The bottom line is we are disconnected from ourselves, so we have created a world filled with disconnection. If we want to change this planet and change this experience, the answer is actually quite simple. You change the source of what is playing out. That source is us. Not the government, not the elite, not the economy, not the religions, but us. Each and every soul on this planet. We change the way our consciousness creates this reality and free ourselves from the enslavement of the ego and mind, and we will change the reality itself.
We seem to have developed a tendency, almost an obsession, with always wanting to feel like victims within our own lives. We're always looking for a reason to blame someone else or some external factor for all of the problems that we're experiencing, or so-called problems. Meanwhile, everything that we are experiencing, we've created for ourselves. We've created this for our own growth. So when you truly look at it, the moment you begin to stop blaming everything outside of yourself and start to look inside yourself as to why you're experiencing what you're experiencing and what sort of feelings that come of the experiences that you're having, you then truly begin to see why things are playing out in your life and how you can actually go about changing it.
To understand how we consciously create, we can take a look at two very practical examples. Examples that show that our entire reality is created by our consciousness and that fundamentally we are connected with everything in this universe. We are connected to each other, the planet, the animal kingdom, the environment, and every other physical thing in existence. For the first example, let's take a look at some of the work published by Cleve Baxter in the book The Secret Life of Plants. To give you some background, Cleve's intention was to determine if there truly was a conscious connection behind all living things. If found to be true, he wanted to further discover if the consciousness of one living thing could affect the consciousness of another. This is what he found.
During the next 6 hours, at some undetermined moment chosen by a randomizer, these brine shrimp will fall to their deaths in boiling water. In another room, completely separate from his laboratory, Baxter has placed a philodendron plant, a polygraph, and a videotape recorder. Carefully, he places a leaf between a pair of electrodes that will monitor the electrical activity of the plant.
For the automation of this experiment to be successful, I have to get a certain distance away from my lab so that my consciousness won't affect the results.
The results of each night's work must be carefully analyzed and recorded. In spite of his high percentage of successful results, only a few daring individuals from the scientific establishment have come forward with offers to replicate his experiments or test his results. The great majority are content simply to condemn his efforts without taking the trouble to investigate their validity.
A few brine shrimp die and a plant feels their death. I think it's the smallness of the event that makes it so significant. It means that even on the lower levels of life, there's a profound consciousness or an awareness that binds all things together.
The results of this experiment clearly show us that there truly is a conscious connection between all elements of nature. So much so that even when one small part of nature is affected, it ripples its effect onto nature as a whole. When we look at the world today, we all know that we consistently pollute the air, the water, and the environment quite intensely with toxic waste. Applying the understanding we gained from the experiment, think now of how our actions are affecting the nature of the entire planet. Every single thing on the planet is affected by every single one of our actions. To take things even further, Baxter performed a subsequent experiment, this one aimed at determining whether the consciousness of humans is connected to all other living things as well.
I decided to water a plant in the lab, very similar to the plant here, Dracaena cane plant. My thought was that as the moisture arrived to the leaf of the plant, the plant should be a better conductor, and I should get a reading on the chart. Well, strangely enough, I didn't get this at all, and in fact, it did just the opposite. Instead of the tracing edging upward as it should have on the chart, it went into sort of the wild excitation, very similar to the first part of a human taking a polygraph test. But then it occurred to me, just about 14 minutes along, what would be the real optimum threat to the well-being of a plant. In fact, the imagery of fire entered my mind, and I not only thought, but I fully intended to burn the very leaf that was being tested with a match. Now, I had no matches in the room at the time, and I don't smoke, and I had to go next door to my secretary's area to get a match. But the interesting thing is that right at the split second that imagery of fire entered my mind, the tracing reflecting the changes in the plant just went right off the top of the page. And the only thing that occurred at that time, no lighting of a match, nothing else, merely the imagery of fire. And I must say that as of 14 minutes along in that initial observation on the morning of February 2nd, 1966, my life just hasn't been the same.
From this we can understand very clearly that both human intention and consciousness are inherently connected to all living things. We in fact are connected consciously to everything on this planet and in our universe. This is because everything is made up of vibrating matter, all connected and made up of one consciousness. We need to explore this carefully, because most of us are familiar with matter simply being known as a solid object. But when we observe matter down to its tiniest forms, we see that it is nothing more than consistently vibrating energy. There is no solidity and matter at all.
It's really only an assumption that the planet and all of the objects on the planet are solid. I mean, when you look deep enough at the quantum level, you can see that there actually is no solidity. There is instead vibrating energy. And this vibrating energy, until the moment we define it, is nothing but pure potentiality.
As mentioned earlier, everything is made up of infinite potentiality, and the moment consciousness decides to create from that, creation takes place. The findings of physicist Thomas Young in his famous double-slit experiment helps to show this, and while doing so sheds light on the quantum field and how our entire reality operates.
And here we are, the granddaddy of all quantum weirdness, the infamous double-slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how particles, or little balls of matter, act. If we randomly shoot a small object, say a marble, at the screen, we see a pattern on the back wall where they went through the slit and hit. Now, if we add a second slit, we would expect to see a second band duplicated to the right. Now, let's look at waves. The waves hit the slit and radiate out, striking the back wall with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The line of brightness on the back screen shows that intensity. This is similar to the line the marbles make. But when we add the second slit, something different happens. If the top of one wave meets the bottom of another wave, they cancel each other out. So now there is an interference pattern on the back wall. Places where the two tops meet are the highest intensity, the bright lines, and where they cancel, there is nothing. So, when we throw things, that is, matter, through two slits, we get this, two bands of hits. And with waves, we get an interference pattern of many bands. Good so far. Now, let's go quantum. An electron is a tiny, tiny bit of matter, like a tiny marble. Let's fire a stream through one slit. It behaves just like the marble, a single band. So, if we shoot these tiny bits through two slits, we should get, like the marbles, two bands. What? An interference pattern! We fired electrons, tiny bits of matter, through. We get a pattern like waves, not like little marbles. How? How could pieces of matter create an interference pattern like a wave? It doesn't make sense. But physicists are clever. They thought, maybe those little balls are bouncing off each other and creating that pattern. So, they decide to shoot electrons through one at a time. There is no way they could interfere with each other. But after an hour of this, the same interference pattern is seen to emerge. The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits, and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. But mathematically, it's even stranger. It goes through both slits, and it goes through neither. And it goes through just one, and it goes through just the other. All of these possibilities are in superposition with each other. But physicists were completely baffled by this. So they decided to peek and see which slit it actually goes through. They put a measuring device by one slit to see which one it went through and let it fly. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could have imagined. When they observed, the electron went back to behaving like a little marble. It produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched.
So what does this tell us about our reality? It tells us that the moment there is consciousness viewing and defining how things should act, the infinite potentials act in that manner. The electron acted in the way consciousness defined it should act. We see two slits, we have particles. We define that they must pass through the two slits and create two lines on the other side. However, before it is defined, the particle carries out every possibility. It is limitless. Consciousness, the observer, who we truly are, is in control of our entire reality. How we define our world and what plays out is entirely up to us on a collective scale. The world is infinite potential and infinite possibility. Our consciousness can shape it in any way we choose. Since consciousness does in fact create reality, and we have created the reality we have today, it should be obvious that if we were to shift our consciousness as a whole, we would create an entirely new reality. Notice it was stated as a whole, because we experience and create collectively, and collectively we choose to experience a particular world. What is happening across the planet is a shift in consciousness. The consciousness is beginning to realize this experience has been overplayed, outgrown, and archaic. It takes no judgment when looking at the experience. It simply realizes that it's time to change the game to something new.
We're actually shifting our consciousness. And with part of the shifting in consciousness, we're shifting our whole reality. And what else plays out with that part of the shift, is that we actually project a different world, a different reality altogether as a whole. So basically the shift is a collective shift that we're going through.
The change has to happen within each one of us. We understand that we are all connected, and that a small consciousness change in one will result in a conscious change in the whole. As we saw in the previous experiments, the interconnectedness we share as beings on this planet expands throughout the entire universe. This is not a question of theory, but an inherent truth that we all hold inside.
And the thing is to look at it even more in a grander aspect of it. This shift is happening not only for us, it's happening all throughout our universe. And all of it is all lining up to bring us to a different level of experience, because we are experiencing a contraction and expansion as the source that we are. So as the expansion, what we've done is we've created all these playgrounds. We created all these what we call worlds. And of course, we have our world we call the Earth. But we've created all these playgrounds and worlds to experience ourselves in. So right now what we're doing is we're going to another level of realm of experience. But as we're doing that, we're also aligning with who we are. So as the creator, we are now becoming more active in a conscious way of what we're experiencing. So what is the shift really taking form, and what is really happening is that energetically we're changing. And our consciousness is changing, so we're reflecting something totally different.
Currently, we go through life stuck in our thoughts, stuck in our heads thinking all of the time. Instead, we can be conscious. We can witness the beauty of the planet, the beauty of interaction with others, and the beauty of being aware of what is playing out in our lives. It simply is about allowing the bigger part of who you are to come through. We might wonder how we can uncover who we are and truly change ourselves inside. We may want to jump to the conclusion that if we simply intend to change, then all will happen. But this isn't the case. What keeps this world projecting in this way is simply the fact that in our unconscious state, driven by our ego, we think that this is all that there is. We have forgotten who and what we truly are, and have allowed the mind to become locked in a prison it doesn't know exists. If we truly woke up, truly awakened to who we are and what we have been playing with for all this time, we would not be projecting the planet in the same way. After all, we have the control. We are the ones that define the potential as we observe it. The key is to become aware of this program, to become aware of the ego, recognizing that it is what we operate from, and that you are the one observing it. From here you begin to see that how we operate on a day-to-day basis is a set of programmed auto-responses based on belief systems and concepts of how things are and should be. But there is no real truth to this. You now realize that you have a choice, not choice based on what was defined by the mind, but choice as a true observer and creator. You can now see yourself experiencing and see what the mind is presenting as how you should be, how the world should be, and how everything should work. You can now choose, do I go with the program and repeat the same cycle we have been repeating, or do I go with what I truly feel inside of me, which isn't based on any form of belief or concept previously handed down?
What is really taking form is we're deprogramming ourselves. We're letting go all aspects of what we defined ourselves up to this point in time. We're taking all of that and we start taking all these definitions, all these descriptions of what we represent on the planet, and we're dissolving all of that one by one so that we can actually connect with that essence that we are and create a whole different reality without definitions, because who we truly are is undefinable. We are pure potentiality. There is no definitions. There is no this is who you are and this is not what you're not. It's basically you're just pure potentiality experiencing and playing. But with this density of energy that we've been playing up to this point in time, we've allowed ourselves to be defined by what we call the roles, what we call our place in our culture, place in our religion, place in our different societies, and also on our placement by all the different rules that we've created that defines what it is to be a human on the planet. So we're basically taking all of that and dissolving all of it completely to actually step outside of that. And then when you're a pure potentiality, your experience realm becomes completely wide open. You're no longer limited to the way that we were experiencing it before.
Who we truly are is not defined as anything. It simply is pure potentiality. It is not our culture, the language we speak, the job we have, the color of our skin, or where we live. We have put ourselves into this tiny box saying, this is all that we are and all that we can experience, and the mind made that real. But now, some of us are starting to poke holes in the box, and these holes are allowing light into the box. And with the light, people are now starting to see the box for what it really is. Just a box that we are stuck inside. Eventually, as more and more of us step out, the entire box illuminates, allowing everyone to see the truth. This is what this shift is all about. This is how we change our reality and the planet, by stepping out of the box, stepping out of being run by the ego. This means letting go of everything we have defined ourselves and the planet as. We cannot simply look at fixing the structure in place or implementing a new one altogether. If we attempt to do those things without first shifting our consciousness, we will still create from the old archaic way of seeing things, from our old understandings of the planet and how we see and define it. This will do nothing but create enslavement all over again, this time just in a slightly different form. We have to go beyond our old understandings and wipe the slate clean. You can never truly bring change so long as you are holding on to everything you have accepted as reality. We have to look back and understand both what we have created and what we have experienced up to this point, and then from that create something totally different, something totally new and totally free. As part of our consciousness shifting, whether we are aware of it or not, or whether the mind likes it or not, we are going to be forced to let go of our old understandings and beliefs about our reality. Everything from our cultural backgrounds, our economic system, our religious beliefs, our education system, and all concepts of who we think we are. Holding on to any of these will only make things more challenging as the shift progresses.
I'll give you an analogy how this works. It's like us right now. What's happening is that we're carrying luggages. And what do these luggages represent? These luggages represent all our belief systems that we have, all our definitions, all what we perceive as our reality and world, which may be our different, not only our definitions of who we are, but all our possessions, all our different attachments that we have to other soul, to other stuff, or to money, or to anything else that we've adhered ourselves to believe that defines us and that's who we are. That's what's in the luggage. That is what we're carrying. We're carrying all these belief systems, all these structures in these luggages. And not only do we have them in our hands, we have it as a backpack also. Now what's happening right now with all these energies going on and the things that are speeding up and creating, it's like us standing in water with these luggages. But what's happening as things are speeding up and increasing within ourselves, the water level is going higher and higher and higher. Now we're walking through this water. So what's happening is, as we're moving, the water starts to agitate further and further. But because we are carrying all this luggage, we're walking on the ground. We can't move from there. But as things intensify, the water just keeps going higher and higher. And we can get up to the point where we're here, and now we're actually have to stop and hold our breath as we're moving because it's starting to move up. And the thing is, as long as we're still holding on, we're still on the ground. We're still at the bottom. But if the water just keeps going up, and it does, and that's what we're doing, with the shift that's going on, the water just keeps going up, and we purposely done that. We have an option. We either drown or we let go of the luggage and float. By letting go of the luggage, we're now floating. But that's the whole thing. For us to make the shift, we need to let go of all of that. As long as we're holding on to it, we're not going to be able to.
This internal shift in each one of us is going to continue to present itself more and more until we let go of what it is that we're holding on to. Each one of us emanates a frequency that adds to the overall vibration and frequency of the planet. The control mechanism is simply trying to maintain a planetary frequency that keeps us experiencing this reality. Every thought or emotion we have carries with it a frequency. If we feel hate, it has a certain frequency. If we feel love, it has its own frequency. When we feel or make certain thoughts or feelings a part of us, we emanate that frequency. The goal of the controllers is to keep us emanating frequencies in a particular range, one that this way of life, this projection, exists in. If we started to get out of this frequency and changed our overall frequency, the world as it is today would change completely. Everything this control mechanism does is geared towards maintaining this world. Genetically designed foods we eat, vaccines, medications, chemtrails, satellite frequencies, chemicals in our water, and so on. They are all there to keep us locked in this frequency. Not only locked, but also many of the actions we regularly do are a direct result of this frequency. Fighting, anger, and protesting. Feel the way these actions make you feel to do or see them. Does it bring you peace? The more we let go and dissolve the old ways and beliefs, the more we assist in shifting the overall frequency of everyone. We begin to step out of the frequency range being maintained, and the reality before us begins to come down. Remember, we are all connected. A change in each of us results in a change in the entire planet. It is up to each one of us to begin to disempower and become aware of all that we individually and collectively have defined as our reality. It is up to each of us to realize that which is not truly us, and to begin to let go of the power the program has over us. In some cases, it may be challenging to let go of many of the things we define and identify ourselves with. But this is this way for a reason. The control structure has designed it to be this way, not only to maintain the system, but also to offer us the challenge in remembering who we truly are. A great place to start is right here, right now. What has this information brought up in you? Are you angry? Full of judgment? Upset? If so, why are you having these emotions? If you were truly at peace, then none of this would bother you, whether you felt it as true or not. If you discover your reactions were from some sort of idea or definition, maybe a belief system that you identify with, ask yourself, do I really need to continue experiencing these old beliefs? Or can I let them go? These are the types of questions and observations we must make about ourselves as we go through the shift. These are the types of questions and conversations we must share with one another. These will allow us to observe and deprogram all definitions and triggers we have in our own lives. These types of questions are what will lead us to experiencing true peace in a world without limits.